Hello and welcome to the show. Listen, I'm so glad that you joined us today. I get so excited every time I have these amazing guests on this show. Now, as I've been talking with you about this year, I'm talking about being grateful for what God has done in your life and continues to do in your life. For me, being grateful means that I have a roof over my head. I have a job, I have a career. Not only that, I have family and friends that love me. And so I am grateful. I'm more grateful for God for just giving me life. Most of you know I'm adopted from birth, and I always talk about that because that's so special to me. And I am grateful. Grateful. You know that song by Tremaine Hawkins and Walter Hawkins. But anyway, I'm not going to belabor you with that. I just love to talk. But, today I am talking with one of my favorite people, my friend, who is the best. When I say professor, when I say doctor, and that's what I call him, Professor Damon Fordham. Damon's going to be on today, and we're going to be talking about his book and all the things that he's been doing, his travels. And I tell you what, sit back, relax, and enjoy, because it's coming up next.
The Cecil Williams South Carolina Civil Rights Museum is the Palmetto State's first and only museum. It honors a generation of people, black and white, throughout the state of South Carolina who deserve to be remembered for their unselfish commitments and sacrifices. Enjoy an immersive and entertaining virtual tour. For more information, visit www.cecilwilliams.com.
Hello, everybody. It's Finkley of The Michael Finkley Show, and you're watching Gold right now. Why? You're watching The Tammy Show. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the show. I always say thank you, Michael Finkley, because he's Grammy nominee, and he's getting ready to go to the Grammys. And I tell you, I'm praying for him. When he comes back, we're going to see that beautiful Grammy. So again, Michael, congratulations, and thank you for being my dear friend. All right. I told you we have a special guest, a very, very special guest. Not only is he my friend, but he's a friend to Charleston. Everybody knows this gentleman, storyteller, author, professor at the Citadel of African American Studies. What else can I say? A whole lot more. But what I am going to say is that you're going to learn so much from this interview today with Professor Damon Fordham. Come on out, Professor Fordham.
Well, glad to be here. And like you, I'm also adopted from birth. And I also talk about that a lot to inspire other people who've been in that situation. And like you, I have a lot to be grateful for.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. And Damon, as always, thank you so much for being on the show, Doc. I love talking with you because when you speak, I listen. Damon. So listen, Damon, let's talk about who Professor Damon Fordham is. I know you, but I want you to kind of give the audience, let them know who you are.
All right. Let's see. I was born in Spartanburg, 1964. I just turned 60, was adopted shortly after I was born. I went on to become an author, historian, storyteller, adjunct professor of history. Made my third visit to Africa, as well as being fortunate enough to have parents who were very interested in history, as well as telling fascinating stories, particularly my dad. And since I was pretty bad at sports, I read a lot. And some of the things that I read contained some of the very same things that they talked about. And so that's what led me on a path of history. And then when I was at the University of South Carolina, Dean Willie Hereford showed me that I could make a living from that. And so I went on that path. And then later on, when I had to come back to Charleston, when my mother took a turn for the worse, Dr. Marvin Delaney of the Avery Institute hired me on, and that refined those talents. So here I am.
Wow, that's a whole lot. Damon, like you said, we both have been blessed and just grateful for the parents that we had, and even more the birth parents that decided to give us up so that we would have the life that we have now. And I'm grateful to both. And so when we talk about Damon Fordham and all that you're doing and all that you learn, how is it that you're able to retain the information that you do? Because I do want to talk about your book, but I am fascinated always when I speak with you and you can rip off all of those dates. You can tell us, I don't know what happened, Willie, but you can tell us about all of those dates and everything. How do you retain that information? I know it's a gift.
Well, very briefly, I would also like to add, too, that I did find my birth family in 2000, and I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of them for the most part, too. So I definitely have to throw that in because I'm sure some of them are going to watch this also.
Yeah.
But I do want to, but to answer your question, basically, while I was not athletically inclined in my youth, because I was very awkward then, even though I've outgrown my awkwardness, I just always enjoyed reading certain things and just had this ability to retain dates and things like that. These are just things that I enjoy doing. And so when you enjoy doing something, you become good at them. So that's basically what led to that, this fascination with wanting to read and learn different things that most people didn't already know. And then, too, my dad made these things interesting with me with his storytelling ability. So all of that played a role in it, too. And then when I found my biological family, I had an aunt named Barbara Collier up in Spartanburg who told me fascinating stories about my family and that background. And so that added to it, too. So all of these things played a major part in the whole in which I am today.
Wow. And, and writing the many books that you've written, what inspires you to continue to write those books?
Well, because I feel that a lot of this information needs to be shared with the general public because we're living in an age of such gross misinformation, especially online. And because as a recent survey from the United States Department of Education from 2022 said that 54% of American adults cannot read above a sixth grade level. So that means that they're unable to distinguish fact versus fiction on the internet. And plus, especially with the African Americans, a lot of us have been so misled into believing that we were less than we were. And so much of what my research says contradicts that. And then as far as with the white public goes, a lot of them really don't know that the reasons why there's racism in the first place, as well as the fact that you had, I noticed in your promo for Cecil Williams just now, you mentioned the people, black and white, that played a role in the civil rights movement. When you talk about the white abolitionists and the white people that played a role in the civil rights movement, people get shocked because that's not common information. So my thing is that bringing about real information in this fashion that is interesting would help to improve and make a better society than what we have today.
Yeah, and that's so important. Damon, when I'm listening to you and talking with you, it brings back the fact about people who dream. And when you were thinking about dreaming back then when you were younger, did you dream that you would be such a popular storyteller and author?
Well, I knew that I would do something constructive, but I wasn't exactly sure what. My initial dream was to be a cartoonist, actually, and people who knew me from day one will tell you that. But unfortunately, there was no one around me to teach me how to do that in a proper way. And it just so happened that I stumbled upon this history thing, and I met Dean Harriford, that I mentioned a few earlier, and Dr. Marvin Delaney, who I talked about earlier, who refined me in that direction, and I was able to do all of that. But I knew even as a child that I would make some kind of impact. I just wasn't sure how.
Wow. Well, you have definitely made an impact. I know you've made an impact in my life because every time I read your books or I learn something new every day, or I'm with you in a panel discussion and I'm moderating or whatever. It's just that the wealth of information that you have is so important. And I think it's so important for our young people to hear all of this. So that brings me to the fact about talking about your book. I'm excited about the Black Folk Tales and Chronicles of South Carolina. What was your inspiration for this particular book?
Okay. Back when I was a boy, I was, a lot of people thought I was weird for loving to read and such. And so I was bullied a lot. But fortunately, I was wise enough not to listen to them and move forward. But I came across Zora Neale Hurston's Mules and Men when I was 13 years old at the Mount Pleasant Library back in 1977. And it was a book full of folk tales that she got from her friends and relatives in her hometown of Eatonville, Florida. And when I read that book full of her folk tales, I recognized some of the very stories that my parents and the other elders around me told. And it made me realize the specialness of these tales. So I then got into the habit of writing down, whenever I spoke with older people and they told me interesting stories, I wrote them down. And so over the years, I amassed a pretty good collection of this. So around 2009, I thought about putting out a book called Folk Tales and Slave Stories that contain this information. And I thought, well, who would want to read this but scholars? But then Dr. Henry Louis Gates, who I'm a man who I'm proud to say is my friend and mentor, who does all these shows on PBS and teaches at Harvard, he wrote a book in 2018 called The Annotated African American Folk Tales, and the book was very successful. So I said, hey, I can do something with this, but I didn't want to seem like I'm a copycat. So I talked to him and I said, look, I've got this stuff full of South Carolina material. And so he said, well, go for it. And so I did. But I also want to add briefly to that there's this treasure trove of Black stories that most people today know nothing about. Back in 1892, a white lady named Abby Holmes Christensen wrote some folk tales that she gathered in Port Royal, and she called it Afro-American folk tales told around the campfire. Then in 1923, another one named Elsie Clues, she wrote the African American folklore from the Sea Islands. And then in 1937, there was the Negro Writers Project, where they were going to get Black people to write all these stories and talk about their experiences. But they decided it was too hot to handle, and they sent it to the University of South Carolina, which still has it in its archives. And then right where you are at Claflin University in 1945, there was this gentleman Dr. Oh Lord, this is edited, right? Hold on for a minute. I forgot his name.
No, but that's all right. We'll fix it, right, Willie?
All right, let me get his name here because hold on a minute. So in 1945, at Claflin University, there was Dr. J. Mason Brewer, who had the Negro Folklore Guild, where he had Black people going around the state collecting stories like that. And he put it in a book that was called Humorous Folk Tales of the South Carolina Negro. And very few copies of that still exist, but one exists at the Avery Institute. So I combined all that material from the folk tales I got in Africa that inspired some of the folklore over here, along with the tales that I grew up hearing from my parents and other elders, as well as the aunt that I told you about earlier. Mm-hmm. And so all that's in the book.
Wow. And as you're talking about it, if Dr. Gates looks at this, you know this book
very well.
Unchained. I have this book on my coffee table as well as some other books. But as you're talking about that, because one of your chapters is stories of slavery.
Right.
And so as we're talking about it, what's your favorite chapter?
Wow, it's kind of hard to say if I have a favorite because so much of it I think is worthwhile. The one about the African prologue, I think, is very interesting because it shows you the foundation of how African American storytelling came from African storytelling about the griots over there. The griots, for those who don't know, are these Africans who are trained to memorize stories of the kings and the queens and the ancestors and such. And villagers gather around them and they recite these stories so as life lessons, as humor, and as teachable moments. And in the cities, you have some of this too. So when I was in West Africa, I met quite a few of these people. Now, one that I think you'll find very interesting is that Dr. Ousmane Sene at the West African Research Center in Dakar in Senegal, West Africa, he was telling us how among the Wolof people that the parents tell the children about a rabbit named Luk and a hyena named Boki, and how Luk, the rabbit, had to use his head to deal with the stronger but more ignorant Boki. And the stories basically surround around the idea that it's best to use your brain instead of your brawn in order to get somewhere. And so I said, well, wait, that sounds like the Brer Rabbit stories in America that we used to tell. And he said, where do you think you got that from? So in my research, I was telling you about Abby Holmes Christensen.
Yes.
Well, in 1874, she was down in Port Royal at the plantation of Nathaniel Haywood. And so Nathaniel Haywood said, you want some entertainment? And she said, sure. And he called one of his field hands, a fellow named Prince Baskin, who had once been enslaved to him, but was still working for him. And so Prince Baskin told her the story about how the rabbit was stuck by a tar baby that the wolf had made to trap him and eat him, but the rabbit used his brains to get out of that situation. Mm-hmm. And so Abby Christensen asked him, well, Prince, where'd you get that story? And so Prince said, from my African granddaddy. So that shows the direct question, the direct way in how these African stories wound up in America becoming the Brer Rabbit stories that were popular up until about 50 years ago.
That's right. And even when you say that, a lot of people may not know Brer Rabbit. If we talk about young people now, they don't know these stories.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, that's another reason why I did that, because you see what happened was that in the 60s, the generation of my parents, like yours, were old enough to be my grandparents.
That's right.
And the younger people of the 60s were going around saying, man, we don't want to hear that old time slavery stuff. And they put it aside. And so therefore, the more recent generations know nothing about that. But I think that, when I went to Africa and I saw how storytelling is still such a part of their culture and how it's so treasured and how it helps children to navigate life through wisdom and so forth, whereas we tended to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and you see all this confusion that you see now. And so I think that if we were to see some of this bridge that helped bring us over, it might make an effect on the young people as well as provide interesting teaching moments for the not so young people.
That's right. That's why it's important for us to have culturally relevant conversations with our young people. And so that they see us. Like you said, you didn't see a Black cartoonist, or you didn't see somebody who could really show you how to be a cartoonist then when you're thinking about it.
Well, actually, I was aware of Maury Turner. You might, you have the same age. He did the Kid Power cartoons back in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. I was aware of Maury Turner, but you see, that's when I was 7 years old and did not even consider the idea that because I saw so few Black cartoonists, I couldn't be a cartoonist. That wasn't in my thought process as a child. Mm-hmm. Because, see, I was surrounded by adults who were about something. So the idea that I was hungry for representation, that wasn't part of my makeup, unlike a lot of other people, because, your father was a doctor, my mother was a nurse and so forth. So,
that's right.
We were kind of straight when it came to that, but it's just that I had no one in my immediate environment who knew how to be a cartoonist to teach me that.
Right.
And they offered that in my high school.
That's right. And unlike today, it's like it's reversed.
Right.
Kids now they see, you have us, but they're not taking advantage of that. When we come back, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about your trip to Ghana, but I also want to show people, Willie, will you show people about your book? Because the book launch is coming up next week. And I'm excited about you having that on January the 14th.
That's right. It's at Buxton Books at 160 King Street in downtown Charleston. Doors open at 5:30, but the program starts at 6, and I should be finished talking around 6:45, and I should be there for about another hour signing books. It'll be the day the book is first released, so you'll be the first to have it if you show up there. If you have pre-ordered it already, it should come in the mail by that date.
Oh, wow. Is it going to be autographed? If I order mine now, I guess I'm going to have to come on January the 14th so I can get an autographed copy.
Well, we can work that out, because I'd love to come to Orangeburg and speak about that. Because, see, one of the big contributions I think that this book is making is that it rescues a lot of great stories that would have otherwise been forever lost to the archives and the graveyards.
That's right. That's right. And you are doing it, Professor Damon. We're going to come back. So just hang tight, Damon. Folks, we're going to come back and we're going to talk further with Damon. Let me tell you, I'm telling you, I'm learning a lot. This is what we call gleaning from our ancestors, gleaning from our folks. Okay. So we'll be right back.
The Orangeburg County Conference Center supports downtown Orangeburg and our surrounding communities. The 6,000 plus square foot space is ideal for groups of up to 400 people attending corporate meetings, conventions, workshops, and special events. Conference Center staff are inspired to ensure that everyone can enjoy the modern amenities. State-of-the-art ballroom that accommodates up to 400 guests banquet style and 430 guests theater style. A warming kitchen with hot boxes, ice machine, refrigerator, freezer, and counter space. A lobby that accommodates 150 guests with special events outdoors. The comfortable outdoor amphitheater has a video wall and seating. Adjacent to the amphitheater is 12,000 plus square feet of green space that extends events outside, plus complimentary on-site event parking and additional parking across the street. Your event can take place all in one spectacular location. We welcome your special event in Orangeburg.
You're tuning in to the Tammy TV show, and we bringing in that Christian rap heat with Big Geek. What up?
All right, welcome back. Listen, if you're just joining the show, I have Professor Damon Fordham, author, storyteller, and his new book, Black Folk Tales and Chronicles of South Carolina, is coming out, and he's got the book launch on January the 14th. Again, Damon, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, we ended, and I want to go back and talk about your trip to Ghana and Egypt and how that correlates with the book that you wrote.
Well, I found a lot of fairly fascinating stories when I was in Ghana. We had a great guide, a griot by the name of Enoch Kojo, and another by the name of Kwame Divine, who I hope is watching this tonight, as a matter of fact, over in Ghana. They told us some really fascinating stories about the culture there that I will probably include in a future book. And then we went to the museum that dealt with the great Kwame Nkrumah. Now, a lot of people, of course, everybody knows Martin Luther King, but few people knew about how Kwame Nkrumah actually led to the liberation of Ghana from England in 1957, the first African nation that successfully fought for its independence from a European power. And he wanted to create the United States of Africa, to turn Africa from a continent to a whole nation, before he was overthrown in a coup d'etat in 1966. And they have a great museum to him over there. And every child in Ghana knows about Kwame Nkrumah. In fact, there are pictures of him with Martin Luther King. Then the great W.E.B. Du Bois, who helped start the NAACP. When Du Bois was refused re-entry into the United States in 1961 because of communism, Kwame Nkrumah basically gave him a townhouse where he spent the last 2 years of his life, and Du Bois is buried there. So there was a guy there named Dora Shika, who she and I gave a tour of this place, and she and I connected, and I agreed to send some of my books to her. So we took a picture of herself in front of Nkrumah and myself in front of the picture of Du Bois, and the two of them shaking hands, and the two of us shook hands to show the unity of Africans and African Americans.
Wow. Wow. And so from Ghana, you left and went to Egypt.
Right. Myself and a group of people, I might add, led by Professor Donald West at Trident Tech. Yeah, in Egypt, we actually went to the Cavern Church, which is where Jesus, Mary, and Joseph hid from King Herod. And we actually saw the ground on which they walked, the well from which they drank from. And I brought some crosses back for for a former girlfriend as well as my aunt and sister that they actually sold at the church where Jesus, Mary, and Joseph had hid out during that period. And we also went inside the pyramids. I only stayed for 10 minutes because when you go inside the pyramids, it's a big dark hole. And then where the ceiling was very low and the air was very musty and so forth. And I said, man, let me get out of here. 10 minutes of that was enough. But those of you who follow me on Facebook probably saw pictures of me riding the camels and all that. And I had a grand time doing that. So all of that was so interesting when you consider that we were in buildings that were 5,000 years old and America is just 250 years old. It makes you realize just what a young country we are in the midst of world civilizations.
That's right. And so how politically, and I just throwing this out, I was wondering, what was the climate like when you were in Egypt?
Well, we were well guarded, number one, because see, the Egyptians, they don't want to lose the American tourist dollar. And so it has to be kept in mind that Egypt has the peace treaty with Israel, and they are not directly involved with what's going on between Israel and Palestine right now, although Gaza/Palestine is right next door to Egypt. We were in a considerable distance from all of that. So, we didn't really have much to worry about as far as that went.
That's
plus
good.
they were military police all over the place. So we were all right.
Well, I'm glad you came back. So that's
people here were worried about me, but I told them we were okay.
That's good. That's good. So if you were to tell someone today, if they go to Egypt, what's a must-see?
Well, definitely depending on your faith, the cavern church where Jesus and Mary and Joseph were. We also went to the museum where we saw the statues of Ramesses, King Tut. I saw the tomb of Isis. I saw the mummy of Nefertiti. Incidentally, Nefertiti has locks. Did you know that?
Yes.
And they're still on her, although you're not allowed to photograph that. So, but I would definitely say, even if you don't go in the pyramids, go to the pyramids, because it just shows you the grandeur of ancient civilizations, and plus too, seeing these actual people from the Bible, such as Pharaoh Ramesses. We saw the portion of the Nile River where Pharaoh's daughter got Moses from and so forth. And we also saw part of King Ramesses' palace and such. Seeing all these things out of the Bible and all that, it definitely does something for your faith.
Yeah. Wow. And to see those pyramids, I mean, just to see the pyramids, to imagine how people could build that.
To this day, they don't know.
Yeah. Was it human? There's that theory that there are other beings that came and built that. You know that. But now that's just what do we say? Folklore.
And that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, we don't say that's folklore. So when what is the one thing that you want people to glean from your book? What is it that you want people to really get from your book?
To sit down with your elders, no matter your race or ethnicity or nationality, while there is time, sit with your elders and get their stories, because all too often after they're gone, people are like, they told me a story once about, but I don't remember. And they often kick themselves because they can't remember it, right? While they're here, record them, write them down, so all that wisdom that they experienced and all these interesting life lessons are not forever lost to the graveyards. If this book makes that contribution, it will have done a service.
Wow. And it's doing a service. I tell you, I enjoyed reading what you sent me. And so I want to thank you again for that. What's the one thing and I'm going to go back to your trip to Ghana. Mm-hmm. When you're in Ghana, what is it that you want people to see in Ghana? What is one place or several places that you
several. I just mentioned the Kwame Nkrumah Museum. To know that such African giants walk the earth is amazing. We also went to Kumasi, where they make the kente cloth, and I brought back some really great kente cloth outfits. But I'd say the most interesting thing was we were at a village with the Akan people, where they had a ceremony for us where we went through an initiation, and they gave us each African names. they gave me the name of Kwaku, which means the child who was born on Wednesday. Okay, he was born on Wednesday, and they had so they beat the drums and we were dancing together and so forth. I've got a YouTube video of that, as a matter of fact, and I literally felt as I did back in 1968 when I was 4 years old, and my parents would take me to the country relatives who lived, in like McClellanville and Owendon, places like that, and we would dance and fellowship with each other. I got that same feeling on a much higher level when I was out there with those villages deep in the forests of Ghana. It's an experience that I will never forget and one that I will truly treasure.
Yeah. And Damon, I want to bring up a trip that you took to Dakar. And didn't you? Yeah, Dakar, when you went to Dakar. And when people don't understand, we are African, we are descendants. And when you go there, you see people who look like you. When I say look like you, I'm talking about you will probably see somebody that might look like a Tammy. And for you, you saw somebody that looked like a Damon, that was like, oh my God, that's family.
Talking the Kaiba story.
Yeah, I love to hear your story when you talk about the family that you met and the tribe that people say you are part of, which is the Wolof. That's it. See, I remember now.
I see. Okay. There's a portion of that deals with that in the ending that I won't get into here. But what I will tell you is that everywhere I went in Senegal, people swore that I was of the Wolof people, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we went to the Black Civilizations Museum in Dakar, the young lady who was giving the tour could pass for my sister. Her name was Kaidiba. And so she and I kept looking at each other, and our host kept smiling at the whole time. And so she goes, "Professor, come here for a minute." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Come meet your Wolof sister." I'm like, and the young lady looked like she could be my daughter or sister. Wow. And we have stayed in touch ever since. But to add to that, in Ghana, it turns out that I am also kin to the Iwes over there. And there's a picture of me that'll probably be in a future book of, I think his name was Samuel Arma, if I recall correctly. But it turns out that he's also Iwe, and he could pass for my younger brother.
I'm telling you, these connections, these I say divine connections.
It's divine, all right. It's divine because I've been in touch with so many of the people who I've met in my African travels and so forth that that literally become family to me and such. So I would encourage people to at least visit. Right now, as you probably know, Ghana is offering dual citizenship to African Americans. But before people jump on that, I would tell them that before you even go to Africa, do your research, okay? Know what country you're going to, what's going on in that country, know something about its customs and so forth. Because if you go there without knowing what you're doing, you can be in a hot mess of things. So at least talk to people who have been there so you'll know the ins and outs of the culture that you're visiting and all that. But if you go there and you have done your homework and such, you would have a very beautiful experience.
That's right. And you have given us, through your eyes, a beautiful experience through your eyes and through all of your stories. And I want to thank you again, Kwaku. And by the way, were you born on Wednesday? Born on Wednesday?
Wednesday, December 23rd, 1964, at the Bull Clinic Hospital in Spartanburg.
Wow. And I was born on Saturday. Okay. Wonderful. Wow. At least we know the right day of that year. Well, I tell you what, Damon, Professor Dr. Damon Fordham, I am just elated and looking forward to your book launch. Again, let's show that. That is on January the 14th. And again, it's Willie is pulling it up for us. And it's going to be at the bookstore. And again, the what's the name of the bookstore? I'm so sorry.
Books. It's called Buxton Books on 160 right. King Street, downtown Charleston. But do write down that email address and call so you could reserve a seat just in case. Okay.
Okay. I'll do that. I surely will. Listen, thank you again, Miss Professor Dr. Damon Fordham. All right. Listen, any last words for you?
Well, no, I mean, I just hope that all of this has been productive and inspiring for those of you who view it, because there's so much negativity and misinformation right now. What I'd like to do is to put some sort of positivity, especially in the minds of the youth with what's all going on right now, so that these youth will one day turn out to be the guiding lights in the new dark ages. So that's basically my assignment, I see.
That's your assignment. And I want to say that I want you to come and talk to the young people at our Jenkins camp this summer, and
Okay.
and do, tell some of these stories, because they need to hear these stories. So I'm going to get in touch with you about that. And again, if we need to buy 10, 20, 30 books, whatever we need to do that, so these young people will have these books in their homes, and their parents can also learn, because we do have some young parents that don't know the history.
Well, we also have older parents that don't know it either. So
no, I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I mean, it's the truth.
But that's the truth.
But also to remember, I have a YouTube channel called The American Storyteller, where you can look up this kind of information instead of all this other stuff about the earth being flat and conspiracy theories and all this other nonsense like that. That, you look at that, you're going to see information that's been verified and vetted. So when I get there, at least I've done the research to let you know that at least I think I know what I'm talking about.
You stop. You know what you're talking about, Professor. The American Storyteller on YouTube. You know it. Well, listen, Professor, thank you so much. I love you, my brother, and I appreciate you. Many, many blessings to you. And if there's anything that I can do here at Kwaku, all you have to do is call me. You know that.
Very well, and I do answer to my African name, so I'm good with it. So go right ahead.
All right. And listen, we gotta get you to play the harmonica, your instrument, the next time as well.
Well, actually, I switched to the melodica, which is more like a mouth organ. So,
yes, the melodica.
I'll be happy to do that for you. Okay.
Okay, I love it. Thank you so much, Damon. You take care of yourself, and God bless you.
You are most welcome.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks, you heard it right here. Professor Dr. Damon Fordham, as I call him affectionately, Dr. Damon Fordham, but Professor Fordham, the American Storyteller, YouTube, his book launch for the Black, for the Black folk tales. I tell you what, you're going to hear and you're going to read about all of this, and I'm going to continue to talk about this. Black History Month is coming up, and we shouldn't just talk about it during Black History Month. We've got to talk about it 365 days of the year, and Damon would agree with me. And so again, thank you folks for always tuning in to the station right here, the YouTube channel, the Tammy TV show YouTube channel. Next week we're going to have another great guest for you, and I'm looking forward to talking with our guest as always. And Damon, thank you again for being on the show. I want to thank my producer, as always, associate producer Willie. Thank you so much for being here with us. Please remember, subscribe to the Tammy TV show. That's the Tammy TV show YouTube channel. All you have to go is hit that red subscribe button, and it will notify you when we're going to be on. Remember, let's be a blessing to somebody today and every day. Call that person. Make sure they're okay. Tell them that you love them. And remember, be grateful. Thank you again for joining us. And until the next time, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.